I'm interviewing Helen Shapiro. It's great to have you on the program today. Now,
It's great to be with you.
Wikipedia describes you as one of Britain's most successful singers. You were really girl power before the Spice Girls came to fame, weren't you?
I never thought about it that way, really, but okay, if you say so.
Yeah. Now, you've had success at 14 years of age. Have you always wanted to be a singer?
Yeah, from a very early age. I come from a very musical background. All the extended family, very musical. Some played instruments, but all had a good voice and ability to sing in harmony and all of that. So it was inevitable for me anyway that I was going to be a singer and that I would become one. And so I'm very grateful for that upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you've had a blessed life?
Actually, when you think about it, when I think about it, when one becomes a believer, one looks back and can see God's hand on things. So I suppose, yes. I mean, I've had my ups and downs like everybody else, of course. But really, with the Lord, everything is a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a lot of temptation within the music industry, lots of difficulties that you have to face?
Well, I'm not in the music industry anymore. I came out of the business at the end of 2002. I've had enough. I've done enough. And I had been wanting to come out since I got saved in 1987. But the Lord hadn't opened the way for me to do that. So, yeah, I always lived at home. I mean, before I got married and all that, I always lived at home, and I've had a very stable upbringing and background, and I kept all my sort of non-showbiz friends from my youth club, my school, all different things from my youth. Instead of being very showbizy, I wasn't a big showbizy type person anyway.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed being in the business, and I enjoyed doing my concerts and doing all the stuff that happened and meeting the stars and so on and so forth. So I can't complain, really.
Did they keep you grounded, your family and friends?
Very much so. It was a very stable thing for me because I lived at home. I didn't go and get a flat in town sort of thing. I was from the East End of London, and I was I was fortunate in that I could just travel within London if I needed to be doing things like interviews or TV programs or whatever. Most of the stuff was based in London at that time. And so I didn't have to travel all over the length and breadth of the country. So I was glad for that, yeah.
What was it? You traveled with the Beatles. What was it like traveling with the Beatles?
That was, well, I started in 61, but the tour life, well, I left school at the end of 61 and started doing these package tours in 62. And the one with the Beatles joined me was beginning of 63. And of course, they were very new, at least to the general public, not to Liverpudlians, of course. And it was great. These package tours, a bunch of performers would get on a coach and travel up and down the country playing in cinemas, doing 2 concerts a night. And I was used to doing these. It was the Beatles' first major tour of that ilk, and we got on very well. We had a lot of fun. We had singing sessions on the coach, along with the other artists who were on with us. And I loved them. They had just released Love Me Do, and that got somewhere in the charts. And during the tour, they released Please Please Me, so that really shot them up to the extent that up to then, they had been one of the opening acts on the bill, but then they closed the first half of the show. They became second on the bill, and after that, of course, the rest is history, of course.
Yeah. Now, your background is Jewish. Were you brought up in a Jewish faith?
I am Jewish. We weren't like religious going to synagogue every week. We kept Pesach, and my parents would go to shul on Yom Kippur. I mean, I wasn't allowed to go until I was older. But yeah, we were very Jewish in terms of culture, tradition, food, all these kinds of things, and friends. And I went to a Jewish youth club, and so that was all very strong in my background and in my environment. And my friends were Jewish. Not that I didn't want to be around non-Jewish people. I had plenty of non-Jewish friends as well. But it was very much like that. And I lived in an area which was a very big Jewish community, right across the spectrum of ultra-Orthodox right through to just secular.
Did you face anti-Semitism at that time?
I faced anti-Semitism after the first 5 minutes, I think, that I was in the business.
Yeah.
The first fan letter, so-called, I got when Don't Treat Me Like a Child, which was my first record, came out and did well. was full of swastikas and things all over the envelope, and you should have gone to the gas chambers and all that kind of thing. And that's me as Helen Shapiro, kind of known singer. But before then, also, just as a kid, around certain areas, you Dirty Jew and all of these things. The first time I ever heard the name of Jesus was when it was screamed at me in the school playground, "You killed Jesus Christ," which totally puzzled me because I'd never heard of Jesus Christ. I mean, I went to a state school, but we had, the Jewish kids had separate religious education lessons and separate assemblies because there were so many of us. So I'd never heard of Jesus until that moment. Funny, isn't it?
How do you cope with something like that?
I don't know. I probably was upset, especially being accused of murder.
Yeah.
But I was a kid. I was about 6, and I don't know. You just do. When you're a kid, you just go on with things, don't you? You just. It's like people say, how are you able to go on stage at the London Palladium or something when you were 14 and 15? You just do it because it's mostly born out of ignorance.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what can go wrong. You just do the stuff. It's only later on you start getting nervous and things.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate, though, very blessed.
At that time, did you have a negativity towards Christianity because of the way that people were saying that you killed Christ?
No, I don't remember ever having that. I didn't put the two things together particularly. I knew that Christianity was, if people said Christianity, I would think of big Gothic church buildings, that is, which was totally alien to my experience. But I always thought, oh, what an easy, excuse the word, religion Christianity is. They don't have to do anything. Everything is just nice. Here we have to do these things and not do these things and so on and so forth. But I don't remember having any sort of anti-thing about Christian. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah. Well, in 1987, you became a believer in Jesus. How did that come about?
Well, I've been doing a lot of work with my musical director, a guy called Bob Cranham, who played guitar for me and did all the arrangements for the band and everything. And he had become a Christian many years earlier. He and his wife had become Christians. And I'd had to get my head around that because I thought they were already Christian because they're not Jewish. And in the Jewish mindset, and in some so-called Christian mindset, if you're not Jewish, you're a Christian. It's just this kind of dichotomy.
Yeah.
But I think they provoked me to jealousy without even realizing it. But I never thought I could be a believer in Jesus because I'm Jewish, and we don't believe in Jesus, and that's like the end of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was going through this thing. I had for years believed in all kinds of isms, spiritualism, Buddhism, all the isms, and that had kept me going for a long time because I always was curious about what was after this life, beyond this life. And then one day I didn't believe any of it anymore, which was really devastating for me. I couldn't do anything about it. I tried to continue believing, but I couldn't. I know it sounds weird, but I couldn't control it. I realize now, looking back, that God was intervening in my life and getting rid of all those beliefs that I had believed in all those years in order to replace them with what he had for me. But I didn't know that at the time. Now, in the middle of all this, which was a bit of a secret with me, I mean, I hadn't told anybody about all of this, which was a difficult time for me. This Bob, my musical director, gave me a book to read called Betrayed, which was contained, as well as the story of this guy who became a believer, contained messianic prophecies. And so that started me on the thing. I'd never heard of messianic prophecies. I'd heard that we were expecting a Messiah, Mashiach, but I didn't know what he was supposed to do or be.
Yeah.
And if he was going to come anyway, because people talked about when the Messiah comes. And anyway, I started reading this book and reading the prophecies, and it fascinated me. I didn't know that they existed, the prophecies from the Old Testament about the Messiah coming. And they all seemed to point to Jesus, so I thought I'd better go and buy a Bible. So I went and bought a Bible, which was a whole story in itself. And I read all these prophecies that are in what we call the Old Testament. And then I thought, well, I better be sure that this is the right thing, because this Bible was translated by Christians. So I went to a Jewish shop to buy a Bible there, and I walked in and I was looking on the shelves. I couldn't find what I was looking for. So a guy finally comes over to me and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'd like an Old Testament, please." And he said, "How old?" And it stopped me in my tracks because I realized I'd really made a blunder. You don't go into a Jewish shop and ask for an Old Testament. Of course, there's no such thing as an Old Testament because there's no such thing as a New Testament. And anyway, he was only kidding around with me. And he eventually took this book down from off the top shelf, and it said the Holy Scriptures. And I thought, okay, that's it. I paid him, and I got out of there. And I opened up this Bible when I got home, this Holy Scriptures, to compare it with my Revised Standard Version, which I'd bought in W.H. Smith's a few weeks earlier. And it was the same. Basically, it was the same. There were these prophecies about the coming of the Messiah, and again, they all seemed to point to Jesus. So from that time, I thought, what do I do now? I will read the New Testament. Now, I was a bit frightened about reading the New Testament because I thought it would be, again, full of anti-Semitism because of the history of so-called Christianity down through the ages. But the first thing I came across was this genealogy of Jesus, most Jewish thing I'd seen outside of the Old Testament, which included Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that the Messiah had to be descended from them and to be from the tribe of Judah and the house of David, and so on and so forth. And this was very encouraging. So I started to read through the gospel accounts, and I realized how Jewish the New Testament is. Of course, I realize now, more than ever, that the New Testament is a Jewish book. It was written by Jews about the most famous Jew of all, and so on and so forth. So I'm reading all about Jesus, and I came face to face with him, as it were, and it was just so wonderful. It's like I fell in love with him, and I read right through all the gospel accounts, and I got to the end of the Gospel of John, Yochanan, and I knew that Jesus was the fulfillment of every messianic prophecy, and that he was and is the Messiah, our Messiah, after all.
Wow.
And I got in touch with Bob and his wife, and I went round to their house that same evening when I finished reading that. And I had lots of questions, and they answered them all. And that night, August 26, 1987, about 10:30 p.m., I prayed to receive Yeshua, Jesus, as my Lord and Savior and as Messiah and everything in my life. And I've never looked back.
Wow. What did your family think about it?
Not a lot. Well, my mum was already, I'd kind of prepared. I could see along the way that it was going to be inevitable, that I was going to be a believer. And she kind of knew anyway. So when I told her, funnily enough, I remember her saying, well, as long as you don't become a Christian. And by that, I think she meant Gentile, because the two seem to be interchangeable in some people's thinking.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what I said in answer to that. But anyway, the thing is that about 6 months later, she became a believer herself. And indeed, we got baptized together in 88. So other members of the family weren't that impressed. My brother, my cousins, a lot of them said, oh, it's just Helen on one of her things, one of her trips, as it were, and so forth. But in the end, a few members, of the oldest members of the family, aunts, uncles, did become believers in Yeshua, in Jesus. Wow. They've all gone to be with him now, as it happens, because they were pretty old then. So I'm very blessed about that.
Yeah. Well, being from a Jewish background, have you ever been to Israel before?
Oh, several times. First time was in 1963.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't become a believer till 87.
Yeah.
But first time was in 63, because my records were doing well all over the place, and including Israel.
Yeah.
And so I went as this sort of, pop singer, and it was lovely, and I loved it. And then the next time was totally different, because it was in 68. So it was after the 67 war.
Yeah.
And I could go to Jerusalem properly.
Wow.
Which I couldn't before.
Yeah. I
had to stand at the top of some place, I can't remember what it was called now, to look over to the east side of Jerusalem. So yeah, I've been there, 8, 9 times, 10 maybe. The last time, though, was in 96, and it's been a while. But going there the first time as a believer, which was, I think, in 91, was totally different from before. It was it really was like coming home. And I was very sad to leave when I had to leave, which I hadn't been before. I hadn't felt anything in particular other than, how nice it was, how good it was. But as a believer, there's something in your spirit that draws you to the place, or it did me anyway.
Tell us a bit about Man and Music. Man
and Music, well, when I first became a believer, it was decided, my husband and another chap thought it'd be good to have a ministry umbrella sort of thing. And so we formed this thing. This other chap was a believer. My husband wasn't yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, we formed Manna. We chose the name Manna, and it's been the umbrella sort of, I don't know what to call it really, name, label, if you like, ever since, for all the recordings I've done, for the videos, DVDs, and things like that. And everything I do basically comes under the Manna Music heading, label.
So now you're singing for the Lord.
I've been singing for the Lord since I became a believer.
Yeah.
I've done quite a few CDs. First one came out in 1990, The Pearl, and various others. They're all done on the Manna label. I wanted to come out of the business, like I say, straight away, but the Lord didn't allow that. But I used to include a gospel type song at the end of my concerts before I came out of the business. So it'd be a whole secular show. Not that I like to divide things up like that. But at the end of the show, I would, having gone off, I'd come back again and give a little potted testimony and sing I Go to the Rock and say to the people, if you want to ask me about this, I'll be at the front of house after the show is over. And I would go out the front after that and talk to anybody who wanted to talk to me about it and give out booklets and things with the gospel in. So even then I was doing that. And then once I came out of the business, I went basically full time doing gospel outreach events. They weren't actually concerts, although I did sing. They were preaching the gospel, testimony and gospel, the true full gospel. And then I did that for years. And then eventually it just became too much for me. And more recently, the last several years, I've been singing as part of a trio called Hebron. And we've done one CD so far. I don't know if we'll ever get to do another one, but what with all kinds of, pandemics and stuff. And so that's what I do now. I don't do any of the solo things anymore. I sing with the trio Hebron. We sing and we play, and we share the lead vocals. I sometimes sing lead, sometimes one of the others does, so on and so forth. And that's how it goes. And we've been doing a lot of concerts, although we had a lot of stuff got cancelled because of the lockdown and all of that. But now we're just starting to re-emerge from that and do more concerts.
Is that mainly in the UK and in churches?
Yes, basically, yeah.
Do you get to speak to other Jewish people about your faith in Jesus?
Not as much as I'd like to, but yes, I do sometimes. And we find the occasional Jewish person turning up at these things. And I have prayed with some to receive the Lord, which is always a joy. It's a joy to pray with anybody. To receive the Lord, whoever they are. Every soul is precious. I really love to bring the gospel to people, Jew and Gentile alike. And I'm hoping that now, at this time in my life, the Lord will use me more to reach out to Jewish people. There seems to be more of an openness now, I think.
What's your prayer for 2023?
I'd like to see my family saved. All of them, the remaining ones, the cousins and nephews and so forth. For health, for me to be able to go on as long as the Lord allows, to reach out to people with the gospel message, with my testimony, etc. And that 2023, I know it's not going to be an easy year for anybody because of the way the world is. It's difficult out there. But I hope to be used more and more by the Lord.
And what's your website for people who'd like to know more about what you're doing?
Well, it's Manna Music. That's MANNA Music, one word, mannamusic.co.uk.
Well, Helen Shapiro, thank you very much.
It's lovely talking to you.
Great.
Cheers.
Thanks.
God bless you.